This is the Defenders podcast on TV Podcast Industries, and this time we're talking about Loki Episode 3, Lamentis.
So what's the plan?
There's a town near here, and can you shut up? Just because I have to work with you doesn't mean I want to hear your voice.
All right, well, slow down, Variant.
What part of imminent death confuses you? Don't call me Variant.
I'm sorry, but I'm not calling some faded photocopy of me Loki.
Good, because that's not who I am anymore. I'm Sylvie now.
Oh, you changed your name? Brilliant.
It's called an alias.
Well, it's not very Loki-like.
Yeah? What exactly makes a Loki a Loki?
Independence, authority, style.
Welcome back, fellow Defenders. It is I, Chris, and you are listening to the Defenders podcast on TV Podcast Industries. This time we are talking about episode 3 of season 1 of Loki, Lamentis. I am joined by my illustrious co-host, gentlemen.
I'm one of your other hosts, Derek.
Yes, and rounding out the lament, I am your third and final host, John.
I like that. A little bit later this week with our recording of Loki. We're most likely going to be recording every week now on Thursdays after the episodes get out. These episodes tend to be quite heavy with stuff that's in them, and we don't want to miss anything when we're recording, so we're recording a little bit later. But it also means that we get some more of your feedback in, which we absolutely love, fellow Defenders.
Yes, but to be fair, what is time if not a construct of just imaginations? It's fine. It is all controlled by the TVA. You can blame them.
Exactly. And indeed, what is love, Chris? Love is but an imaginary dagger.
Yeah,
Gosh,
beauty.
the philosophical musings of Loki and Sylvie.
Yeah. We will get deep into that as we get into our episode, I'm sure.
Yes, but let's not bury the discussion too far. If you are not following us, make sure you head on over to tvpodcastindustries.com, where you can follow us on any good or evil podcast catcher, Asgardian or what's the Midgard? There you go. Asgardian or Midgard based podcast catchers. We're on all the places. You can find us there. But when you're over at tvpodcastindustries.com, you can also leave us a voicemail, or you can send us your feedback or voicemails to feedback@tvpodcastindustries.com. Don't forget, we're on all the socials, the Facebooks, the Instagrams, the Twitters, but over on Facebook.com/groups/TV Podcast Industries, we also have our beautiful group where you can come in, talk to like-minded fellow defenders about all the fun and games that is Loki. Give us your thoughts, give us your theories, because you know what? I have a lot of theories. We have hit the halfway point, and I think I know where it's going, but do you? What's your theory?
My theory is I have no idea where they're going to be going from here, because they have no way of going anywhere from here, but we'll see.
Yes. There we are. But gentlemen, let's get into it. Derek, do you want to tell us who gave us what this episode?
Absolutely. Once again, from head writer Michael Waldron and lead director Kate Herron, who directs every episode of the season. This episode was written by another upcoming head writer, Bisha K. Ali, is a British screenwriter. She's worked on Sex Education in the past with other writers from this show. She's also credited as a story editor on this season, and has been tapped as the creator and head writer for the upcoming Miss Marvel TV show on Disney Plus, which we'll see, I think, towards the end of this year. It's already completed, so I think it's at the end of this year. It's just marked as late 2021 at the moment. No announced date yet, but really cool to see a writer for one of the shows moving on to become the lead writer on the next show, effectively.
And it looks good.
Yeah.
It looks very good, because I've seen a couple of comic accurate costumes, but also there's some funny, that kind of paparazzi style shots we get from on set sometimes. There's one of her running, and it's the lead actress is doing her in Biggin, kind of using her powers, and without CGI, and just a paparazzi guy, it looks a bit weird. I know it's going to look amazing in the end, but it's just this one person going, yeah, and throwing out her hand.
See, that's why I always ignore set photographs, but there was a great one, a great version of that for Doctor Strange with Benedict Cumberbatch and Benedict Wong jumping in the air. Do you remember the GIF that was just used and they kept replacing the background for loads of things?
Yeah.
Because it was just recorded in the center of New York with no actual CGI going on. Yeah. But I remember that. That was a great set photo. So, yeah. But let's get on with this discussion about the episode. John, do you want to give us the synopsis for episode 3 of Loki?
Sure. After interrogating Hunter C20 for information on the Timekeepers, the Variant arrives at the Time Variance Authority headquarters to complete her mission, closely followed by Loki. He proposes a team-up, but the Variant refuses. When Judge Renslayer confronts them, Loki uses a TemPad to take them both out of the perilous situation, but into an apocalyptic situation on Lamentis 1. With the TemPad out of power, they are stuck on Lamentis 1, which is due to be destroyed by a dying moon. With meteors falling and gravity quakes becoming more frequent, they need to charge the TemPad to escape the apocalypse. As they try to find a power source for the pad, the Variant tells Loki she goes by the alias of Sylvie, and she's been running from the TVA her whole life. She also reveals later that the Minutemen are all variants, stolen from their time and made to work for the Time Variance Authority. After a run-in with a lady and her big blaster, Loki and Sylvie sneak their way onto a train reserved only for the wealthy to get to the planet's evacuation vessel, the Ark. This is the only power source powerful enough to charge the TemPad. During their journey, Loki gets drunk and is thrown from the train, closely followed by Sylvie, but the TemPad is broken in the fall. Their only hope now is to hijack the Ark that is shipping survivors from the planet to escape the apocalypse. Loki and Sylvie fight their way to the planetary escape vehicle but are unable to make it through the crowd in time. Their only option is to watch on as the Ark is cut in half by a falling meteorite as the moon begins its final descent towards planet Lamentis 1.
It is a massive cliffhanger moment for this episode, really, isn't it? How are they getting off the planet? What's going to go on? What's happening here? They exhaust every option at the end of the episode. And if I think I'm right here, this is the shortest episode of the season. I think it counted at about 35 minutes from opening credits to closing credits. So that's almost like the level of WandaVision. Like we're pretty short on this episode, but it's a very compact story. In this episode, they're pretty much telling you we're getting from this point to this point, and they do that and the episode ends, basically.
Yeah, it is, but it is a little weird. I have to say, I was slightly surprised, dare I say it. Mm-hmm. I mean, just because it is only 6 episodes long. Yeah. I guess it's the moment where, they're in the TVA, the two of them. So, the escape there from, Judge Renslayer, that's kind of not what I was expecting. I thought this was all going to be within the TVA, after we'd seen where she had, teleported to ultimately in this episode. So it did feel like, that big, zig, as Chris would say, when I definitely thought they were just going to be zagging in the TVA building.
Right.
So let's discuss all of those zigs and zags. Mm-hmm. So let's jump into it. Our top 5 variants for this. Kicking off with variant number 1. The variant itself, interrogates Hunter C20. Let's kick off at the beginning, gents. Yeah. Like, we open in a margarita-filled bar.
Yum. Oh.
Yes.
I'm not drunk, I'm just full.
Yeah, lots of drinking in this episode once again.
Yeah. Well, we should have done Whiskey Watch, but now it would have been Tequila Watch. Yeah. But we wake up with Hunter C20, and we see Hunter C20 in this bar with what we knew as the variant at that point.
Yeah, a little flashback to what we saw in last week's episode. We saw Hunter C20 waking up with the team arriving and telling them that she's revealed this information about where the Timekeepers are. And now we see the flip side of that, this variant who's probing in her brain and pretending to be her best friend, effectively. Yeah. She thinks she's her best friend, thinks she can tell her anything. And it plays out, I think it plays out really well. It plays out like you're seeing the variant. We'll talk about her real name later on, obviously. But you're seeing the variant in a previous time. You think it's the real person and they're having just a conversation together. Well, at least I did. That this is just a flashback to who she was before she got captured by the TVA, effectively, is the way I was thinking. And then suddenly it's the weirdly proposed question after what seemed like a really normal girls' night out, basically. And then it's just that weird question of how many people guard the Timekeepers, and you're going, oh, okay, this is just all in our mind.
Yeah, exactly. I definitely thought it was a flashback, because it wasn't until that point I was like, that's the variant. I didn't, because of obviously not cloaked up and doesn't have the horns on, the mini horns.
Or one horn. Broken horn.
Yeah. It was, I was thinking, who is this? And I was just saying, it is a flashback. And so, yeah, that was really good with the kind of then the slow ominous music coming in and it kind of time jumping. I did like the whole explanation around the brain freeze as well. I thought that was quite cool, dare I say it.
Did anybody Google it? Did anybody find out whether that's a real explanation of brain freeze?
No, it is not. It is close, but is not the cigar. For brain freeze, it's to do with the pain receptors and synapses with the temperature in your mouth changing,
right?
And causing the neural network, the synapse, the nerve endings between your mouth and your brain, kind of basically being overloaded.
Right.
It's weird. You saying neural network, like obviously we have a neural network, but I associate it so much with like Terminator or something like that. I was going,
and data from Star Trek data always mentioned the neural network.
And so it was just like, oh my goodness.
I meant nervous system, if that's a better way.
Right,
but we do have fellow defenders who are doctors who can probably give us the actual the technical term, and then we'll just read it out as a part of our feedback for next episode.
I don't need to use my usual disclaimer. We are not doctors here.
Yes,
well, one of us is a doctor here. Sorry,
but not the medical variety. Doctor. Not the medical variety. So don't ask me to sort of prevent a heart attack on a plane. Otherwise, I am in deep trouble. Other than my basic first aid.
I have to call out the Sophia, who plays the variant, and Sasha, who plays Hunter C20. Mm-hmm. Loved them in this. As you said, it was that girls' night out, and it's one of these reasons these two actors are fast becoming, I should say, like some of my favorite actors in kind of our nerd space, right, if you will. They really are. And that's one thing Marvel is great at doing. We have to remember Tom Hiddleston was a nobody, along with Chris Hemsworth. Like they got flack for when they announced these two lead actors for their Thor film, and everyone's like, who? And I think this is one of the things like Marvel is well known, in my opinion now, is now well known for getting these. You kind of go, I don't think this is going to work. Who are these people? Why not get some more well-known actors? And then like, oh no, this is perfect. Like the embodiment of what we see across these, just in this even opening flashback is fantastic.
Yeah, they do a nice blend, don't they, of kind of experience and new actors, I think.
But it's every single one, right back to Robert Downey Jr., who was, we'll say, down in his luck in his career at the time that he was cast in Iron Man. Chris Evans. Why are you putting the Human Torch from that Fantastic Four movie into the Marvel Cinematic Universe? As you say, Hemsworth and Hiddleston, complete unknowns. Was there a known character in the first four? Who's the fourth member of that team before the Avengers? Ed Norton, who was Incredible Hulk and then was recast. There's no other one really nobody else that was known coming into these shows as a great actor, really. But they're great at choosing character actors that can play these roles. Absolutely.
I always feel that, in hiring Chris Evans, that someone in Marvel, whether it was Kevin Feige, knew that, because he plans it out, there's this idea of he's this master tactician, the storylines. Was he going, yes, that is America's arse, even before the first Avengers was even kind of in production? He was thinking that far ahead.
20
or was he just
films
hypnotized by it? I guess.
He's like, you literally got this big kind of whiteboard that goes around the spans of a room, and it's just like the story of America's ass. 20 films later.
That's it.
Absolutely.
That's how I know the Avengers series.
Yes, the story of America's ass. I want to quickly discuss the hallowed halls of the Timekeepers, because very quickly we see the variant escape to the TVA headquarters. We see that very fun moment where she attempts to use magic. Oop! Magic doesn't work.
Yep.
She then incinerates one of the Timekeepers.
Yeah. She's a good fighter as well.
Very good. Well, and surprisingly, we'll talk about it later, but mirrors the same moves Tom Hiddleston does when he's fighting as Loki.
Okay.
So it's really interesting, especially when we see the escape part later and the train battle. They actually do the exact same moves, but with just like basically different heights and kind of frames doing it.
There's certainly a great move that she does where she runs up the wall and flips over, taking out one of the Timekeepers, which I thought was really good. Sorry, one of the Timekeepers, not Timekeepers.
Not yet.
One of the Hunters.
Yes.
Which I thought was really cool. But yeah, she's using her own technology on them and wiping them out of existence. Effectively, is what's going on. I think that it's a really cool fight. But Loki's appearing right behind her. Effectively, he's arrived back just as we saw last episode. He's jumped in behind her, so he's not far behind her, and proposes to work together effectively, which is great. You know, he's had that discussion with her already. She's refused, and now that he's here and he kind of knows what her plan is. She's there to kill the Timekeepers, which is pretty much what he wants to do, except he wants to take over the TVA, because he thinks the power that they have is massive. Whereas it seems like the variance version of this plan is that she's just going to destroy the whole TVA.
Yeah. And, she's making her way to the gold elevators that she's learnt from C20. There's two things that really kind of stood out to me. One on the, it was just on the sound design, the battens of the Minutemen as they're being swiped at the variant. There was that kind of electrical crackle that it felt like Kylo Ren's lightsaber, that kind of slightly sort of off pure lightsaber, I guess. It felt like that. And the other was, and maybe it's been in episode 1 and 2 as well, certainly when they've been in the TVA, but the music here, was just so Vangelis from, Blade Runner.
Yeah,
exactly.
Definitely felt that.
Like, it was really like that. I loved it, and it gave a really nice feel, and it felt like it was just building and building to them, getting in front of these, the gold elevators, to go up to the Timekeepers, just before Renslayer obviously is there ready to attack her.
Absolutely.
And it was building, and that was such an interesting, the music starts swelling, the fight, the action ramps up, I did think this was going to be a more kicky, punchy, story episode based on that. And then essentially we get Renslayer confronting the Lokis, and we have the variant grabbing Loki, the other variant, dagger to the throat, which he grabbed back. I loved that little nod. He grabbed his daggers back from Mobius's locker.
Yeah.
But basically, and she goes, yeah, kill him anyway. Go for it. And then it's essentially, all right, everything through the door. Story, episode, everything goes through that door, and we essentially land on a new planet.
Exactly. One of the things I do love about these scenes here is neither of these Lokis actually matter to the Hunters. They're not looking to keep them. They're not looking to put them on trial. They're now just looking to wipe them out, basically.
Yeah.
So, like you see, Judge Renslayer is, as you say, arriving there with two of the Hunters just to kill them both, effectively, to take them out. And that's the deal here. They're not going to be interrogated again or captured again. They're just going to be killed. So, it makes me wonder what will happen after this when they do find their way back to the TVA, or if they do find their way back to the TVA. I presume it's not going to be on good terms. I presume the whole army of the TVA is hunting the two of them now.
Yes.
But you're right, Chris. Onto Variant 2. They're on a new planet. We're off to the planet Lamentis 1. And I had a question at this quick moment here for you guys. So which one are you going with? It might depend on age here, but which one are you going with? Is the rest of the episode a Doctor Who episode, or is it a Rick and Morty episode?
Doctor Who. Very much this felt for me Doctor Who. Johners?
Oh, definitely. Doctor Who all the way. In particular that it's a mining, planet. Just because I think in order to give that space age feel without huge amounts of special effects, at least certainly in the early days, then they would frequently go to the Welsh slate mines to film this. This was definitely reminiscent of Doctor Who, with the use of mining to help with the more kind of, I mean, now I guess with the budget, now they go to Iceland, don't they? With all the black volcanic beaches and stuff.
Yeah.
But back in the day, back in the 60s and the 70s, where I guess even the bins weren't getting collected, then, it was straight down to the Welsh, slate mine.
Yeah.
A bit of colour on the lens. So, yeah.
And then you're sorted. You're on another planet. Absolutely. And once again, the reason why it partly felt a bit like, a Rick and Morty episode to me is because it's about these two characters arriving on a planet that's destined for destruction, and they're trying to save themselves, not the planet or the people on it. They're trying to save themselves and get out of there and use every trick in their book to get them out of this place. And they're both massively intelligent, just like Rick as well. So
the question I have was, who's the Doctor and who's the companion? Ooh, controversial.
Well, yeah. It would feel like, I would say the variant, or Sylvie, as we'll begin to call her, because this is where we find out her name. I would say she'd probably be a bit more Doctor-like because she's been here before and she knows what this place is. She's the one dispensing the information, and Loki's using his tactics to help, I suppose, which feels a bit more companion-like, even though he's the central character of the show. But
true, I would be in agreement there. So Lamentis 1. From the comic books, looked accurate to the comic books. It was in Infinity Annihilation arcs.
Right.
I don't think we're going to get the kind of Nova and the Nova Corps and the Nega bands and kind of Quasar and all that, because that's from the comic books in terms of where. But it very much comic accurate. Looks purple in this. So yeah, it was good. No one else cares. But I remember this because I loved that big series, the Annihilation series, the whole series that came out with Cosmic. It was very much a Marvel Cosmic event, and it was great in the comic books. And I remember this being in this with miners, and it was a good story. But they chose this obviously just because they needed a place to a Armageddon event. To lay the brakes on. Before we move on to our next variant and discuss the conversations, what happens as they're there, how did you guys feel? Did they essentially have slammed the brakes at this point? Like we went from what, like you said, it was the music, the tone, the action, everything was ramping up within the first few minutes, and then you go to a walking simulator for a few for a few minutes.
Kind of.
No, but you know what I mean. Sorry, I'm joking. I'm being very facetious on this, but it was such a. I found it quite jarring.
Okay.
In terms of the story, it was all ramping. I was like, oh my god, they're gonna get like the big mid-season reveal. We're gonna like find out the Timekeepers. They're gonna go up in the elevator.
Yeah,
I mean, okay, we're now on a different. Oh, are they going to go back? Oh no, okay.
Yeah, I felt a bit the same, to be honest. I mean, basically, sort of kind of taking notes on it. I just did shame they left the TVA because, but I mean, this works for them to get to know one another outside of a manically paced situation, which you could have had with them sort of in the TVA fighting off a load of Minutemen. But nonetheless, you could still have, they're very chatty, these Lokis. So you could have had, to some extent, the exchange of information. Not some of the more, sort of personal ones, like the one around their mothers, which I thought was really nice, but, on the train. But I think, it felt like it took it out, of it. And it's just more because, and I don't normally say this really, but mainly because it is only 6 episodes long. And I think, as you say, it was a bit like them applying the brakes. And I thought, well, that's interesting. Obviously it works for the scripts that they have, so fine. I guess the thing for me that it will pay off is because it's such a cliffhanger, and I think this is possibly where it kind of, how it will be seen, is because it's such a cliffhanger. What happens next? And I know that sounds really tropey, me saying it, but at the moment, I've got this really awful suspicion that given the potentially two things, but one of them is that literally Mobius turns up to get them because they've managed to track them, in some way. And I feel they could have kept it really nicely in the TVA sort of.
Yeah.
Yeah, my own feelings on it, I don't think this pushed the brakes on it. I think you would have had a very exciting, action-filled episode in the TVA, but you've spent 2 episodes wondering who the figure in a hood is. They meet, and this is a really good way, from a writing standpoint, this is a really good way of putting your main 2 characters with 0 distractions other than the impending apocalypse to be able to sit down and actually talk to each other and give reasons for it. The traveling on the train, well, they can't do anything other than talk to each other effectively. So it gives great moment for the 2 of them to realize who each other is and find out more about each other. And I think yes, there are 6 episodes, but if this character of Sylvie is going to be there for the rest of it and become a member of the MCU effectively, you need to have some time with her alone and find out more about her. And I think you do find out some in the episode. Whether it works or not, I'll talk about in my defend later on, as an episode as a whole. But I think the decision to not have an action-packed episode and have an episode where the 2 of them sit down and talk and make some kind of friendship or some kind of relationship between the 2 of them, I think was the right impetus.
Yeah, but I think as well, you could have the friendship forged in battle at the TVA. Even in Die Hard, there was always the quiet moment as he was hiding away under a desk or something. It worked for me. Yeah. I think just it was like, oh, okay, they're going in a different direction, and the timekeeper thing is going to maybe be closer to the end or something. I thought we were going to just get that sooner, which I felt was really different. And so I was like, oh, okay. But certainly, they needed to get to know one another for sure. I think.
So let's speak about the getting to know. Let's speak about the moment on the planet. Move on to our variant number 3, which is essentially the best we can say is the train journey, the before, and let's include the conversation to the train, and let's include the train itself.
Absolutely.
What did you think of this time spent, the character development? Boys, what did you think?
Well, just before that, I definitely loved the lady with the big blaster. I love the fact that they needed to find this energy source, to charge up the TemPad. Firstly, I like the variant, was taking a neon sign, and to trick Loki into handing it, back to her after he had hidden it through his enchantments. But then realizing that it needed a much significantly bigger energy source. And so there's this lady with the huge blaster, which you were thinking, okay, this can be used. And I thought that's why they were possibly going in there. But I loved this with the interchange with the variant being blasted off by kicking through the door and taking the direct approach, and then Loki coming in with his diplomacy, and then just the lady saying, Patrice would never have said something that nice to me in the last 30 years, and effectively landing in the same place as his namesake variant. So I thought this was really, really nice. And of course, even then the big gun, because that was a massive gun. I felt like Arnold Schwarzenegger should have been sort of handling it rather
or at least Rocket Raccoon.
Yeah, rather than a lady in a kind of a rocking chair. But then the fact that isn't even enough, and they actually need the power of an entire spaceship, is like, okay then. Okay. So, but it makes the reason it's their reason for getting to the train.
Yeah.
It's the reason they need to sort of make it there, as well as the fact that, this planet, they're on a ticking clock. It is 12 hours till boom time,
Boom, we will get to. But before we do, we get a name for the variant. We get a conversation.
Don't call her Loki. Don't
Nope.
call her the variant. I thought this was interesting because there's obviously been loads of speculation about who this character is. People had seen the name of the character pop up in the credits. About 2 weeks ago, it was the Spanish credits for the character that were up there saying Sylvie. So they made the jump to the conclusion that it's a character called the Enchantress from the comics. We hear a conversation with Loki where he continually says to her, "Teach me the enchantment." So indicating that it's an enchantress, but it's interesting in the conversation, the way that she describes herself. She says, "I'm no longer Loki.
Yeah.
I've chosen a new name for myself. My name is Sylvie." She has that conversation with Loki saying, what does make a Loki to him? So defining that she's a very different person, but is still a Loki. Started at the same point, it seems. Started, potentially on the ice giant planet, born there. Maybe she wasn't adopted by, Odin. Maybe she didn't know her. Well, she says she didn't know her mother. So we don't know her full backstory. There's loads of other bits that need to be filled in, but it seems like her point, I think from what she's saying, her point where she changed from this sacred timeline of the TVA seems to have been way, way earlier in her life. She says that she's been chased her entire life by the TVA, and this plan that she has is years in the planning. Did it change, 4 or 5 years? I think it's, 4 or 5 years old, I think, when Odin finds Loki's son, and takes him back to Asgard. So is that the point where it changed? And because she diverged from the timeline there, she's always been chased from that point onwards? Is that what that moment is? We'll probably hear more about that to see when it was that she split off. But I think that's what we get from the interaction. She's a massively different character because she wasn't brought up the same way as Loki, and that made her not part of the sacred timeline, I guess.
She was told she was adopted from the early age.
Yes.
And she did. Freya was there, but Freya didn't teach her magic. So that's when she did say.
She said she hardly remembered her mother at all. Yeah, it's like a faded photograph.
Yeah.
She had no interaction with her mother.
And this enchantment spell is, she has had to learn all of this
Herself.
Yeah, herself.
Yeah.
Like, it was interesting as well because, the enchantment stuff, as you say, was heavily kind of signposted here. But it was even just when she was saying that, the stronger willed people, she needs to kind of really sort of put them into a situation like she had to do with C20. And give that memory of their past and keep them sort of, in that memory and inhabit the memory physically. So I thought that was kind of interesting. I was just wondering, again, because kind of a bit like with saying, will it be just that Mobius turns up and saves them from this planet, or is this some kind of enchantment? Because as well, like, you have Loki saying, "I need to know that I can trust you," or, as they're walking after they've been thrown off the train, "I need to know that I can trust you." Like, he feels he's the one that has effectively been giving her all this information in the same way that she was working to get the information about the Timekeepers from C20. So I thought that was the other thing that I thought was really good here, as well, with this whole interaction between the two of them.
Yeah. I love they are differentiating, Sylvie and Loki, because it does allow you to create, theoretically, Sylvie now can be her own thing in the MCU. It means she is not bound to essentially be sidelined by the end of this series to a degree. She can now become her own thing and become a character throughout. And you're right, they said the leak on the credits 2 weeks ago kind of started signposting that the use of the term enchantment. It does lead you to believe, oh, this is essentially the Enchantress from the comic books, and she wears some green. Oh, so does Loki. Oh, and then it was Lady Loki, which is also in the comic books. It seems they've kind of created a amalgamation of these two to agree. I name the enchantment parts and then a female Loki. But again, I like this because it does allow Sylvie to go beyond, because you could not have two Lokis. It would just, not saying that people couldn't handle it, but like, that's like literally having two main Thors within the MCU. Thor 1, Thor 2. Like, you need a way to differentiate them, even in naming conventions.
Honestly, just as a podcaster, having both of them named Loki would be really, really irritating. So then Loki said to him, and then Loki said to her, and then Loki said to Loki, would be just a pain. So the differentiation, fully appreciated. I will also call out, like we've mentioned before, as all three of us are comic book readers, the character of Enchantress is, I would say, reasonably minor character. The character of Lady Loki, I think I've probably seen more in cosplay than I've seen in comic book pages. Like, they're not massive characters, so changing their origin is very simple for the MCU to do, because they've done that for major characters in the past. Every single character gets their origin changed for the MCU anyway. But when it's a character that doesn't have a huge amount of backstory, less than 10 years old, it's very likely they won't have a huge amount of fans that'll be annoyed by the changes. Hey, I'm a fan of Nick Fury, who has a 60-year history, as his entire story has changed for the MCU. So,
So, just very quickly, there's two Enchantresses in the comic books. So there's the original Enchantress, which is the kind of the main one that everyone kind of would know from the Thor and all that. And then there is the Sylvie Enchantress, which is, again, about 10 years old, is an actual product of, spoilers, Lady Loki, which, like, her origin is tied to Lady Loki, who, I don't know, I'm not going to spoil it. It's a good story. Read some of the Avengers, Siege and, the disassembled storylines within the comic books if you want to know more about Lady Loki or the Enchantress. But
not massively well-known characters in the comics.
Yes, you're right. That's the thing. They're not well-known. And so I think this is a fun way, and it's a fun way to differentiate them, just even for us podcasters, but then also when we start to get into this beautiful storyline and the conversation on the train between Loki and Sylvie about, like, the story from Loki on the small bit of magic, the fireworks that he learned from Freya. And that was just, like, again, one of the reasons I'm loving these shows, like the Disney Plus shows, is because we're getting more time spent with some of the characters that we've loved than ever before.
Yeah.
So we got it with Wanda, we got it, like, Wanda, the whole backstory, and I love her and Vision's characters even more. Same with Falcon, Captain America, and the Winter Soldier. Loving them even more now because we've spent so much time with them. This is the same with Loki. Like, this small bit of backstory even further kind of cements the part from episode 1 where he sees Freya die. Like, and the tear, like, because he now knows that his future was to get his mother killed by accident, but also now we know even further, we knew that she was the one who taught him magic, she was the one who always kind of his protector, quote unquote, kind of thing. It was he was the good son, and no matter what happened. Yeah,
you got the feeling right the way back from the original Thor movie that Freya was on the side of Loki and Odin was on the side of Thor. Very much so. Thor had his moment with Freya that we saw in Endgame, and now you're seeing that there was a good connection between Loki and Freya the whole time. I do feel, in what came across for me in this episode and how Tom Hiddleston's been playing the character of Loki since that first episode, he feels a bit heartbroken. He feels different character than we've seen. Remember, this is the character from the Avengers, and that time in the Avengers he was very cocky. Even though he didn't win the fight, he was still slagging off the Avengers. He was still attacking the Avengers verbally, to the point that they stuck the face mask on him to stop him speaking. Now that he's found out his future, and now that he's found out that his whole life didn't have the glorious purpose, I do think Hiddleston's playing it quite well. This character that's a bit broken. He's a bit different than we've seen in the other movies after the Avengers, I suppose.
It's even
I do really like that about the character.
It's even like how he he downplays Sylvie's glorious purpose because, well, I would never have done that. It's kind of like everything, seems to be at odds with what he, thinks of himself, but also knowing how things played out for him ultimately to his death. So I thought that was really good. And I think, that the conversation between these two on the train, it was really, I loved this interaction between the two of them. I thought it was just so good, even just, and a scoop for our fellow defenders, that, Derek does share something with, Loki in that he also hates to travel backwards on a train.
That's true.
Yes. Whereas I love it because it's like being able to go backwards. But then she has, I need to have my back to the door so that I can see the entrance, and he's like,
I love that he calls it out, going, there's doors in every direction here. You're just trying to annoy me, basically. But a part of the broken part of Loki, that we're seeing here is also him turning to alcohol. We see that moment when he gets offered champagne. He takes 2 glasses of it, and then, she takes a rest. Sylvie takes a rest, and he goes for even more drinks and more drinks. And then it cuts to him living his true Asgardian life, let's say, where he's singing his Asgardian song. The only English words we have for it is when she sings come home, being repeated over and over again, but he's getting everybody else on the train all whipped up into this enjoyable, it sounds more like a lament to me, for the Asgardian side of it, but then the bit that everybody can join in with sounds pretty raucous and pub-like. But it does sound like a lament, the actual tune of his Asgardian piece, but there's no translation for it.
Definitely, and I think Loki himself, as you were saying, he's lamenting everything about his life, and he's also ironically on a planet that shares the same kind of derivative.
Well, absolutely. We are on Lamentis 1. This is the first lament of the Loki opera, I guess. I do love there is another callback to Thor as well. You may have noticed it where he grabs his glass and smashes on the ground, which is very like Thor from the original Thor, where he gets a cup of coffee and does the same thing. But he's a true Asgardian. That's definitely the thing here that we see.
Of course, the only true way. It's the same with the Greek plate smashing. It has to be done. It's just when in Rome, or
it's the same with any Irish man and 2 or 3 pints of Guinness, to be honest, Chris.
But that drunkenness leads to them being discovered, and a ruckus ensues. Mm-hmm. And I love this. This was quite a fun. Even a drunken Loki still fights very well. Yeah. Kinda. Hey, he basically Sparta kicked a guy through a window.
Yeah,
I loved it.
He did, but his initial moment at the beginning of that is he's trying to use his magic, and he magics up the fireworks again. So he's drunk, and I think that's what's happening in this scene. That's why he doesn't win. That's why he gets knocked out the window. That's a real punk way to go out for Loki. I think he's just not at his best because he's full of alcohol.
The other thing as well, importantly, on the conversations as well, before they get thrown out of the train and things go from bad to worse with the TemPad.
Yeah.
But, is that, the script here does, take on board, and gets explicitly said about Loki being bi. Mm-hmm. So, I think that's really important that that's called out. It's, whether it's by accident or design, given that we're in June, and it's Pride Month. But I mean, ultimately, this is a big thing for a lot of fans, both of, film and comics. So I think this, that's another element, as Sylvie talked about, whether there was a princess or a prince in Asgard that, he loved, as they're trying to determine what love actually is.
Yeah. And he responds with, there were many of both, much like yourself, Sylvie. So confirming she's also bisexual as well. So, it is really important to see that kind of representation, because it's so easy for a massive Marvel studio as they are to just ignore it and not mention it. The character himself in the comic books has had moments, where he's classed as a bisexual. He's attracted to both sexes in the comics and has had moments with both. And they could easily have just ignored it like they have for 10 years. I think it's important to have a major character that you've already identified as bisexual in the comic books, at least refer to it in one conversation over the course of those 10 years. It's much more important that we'll see the lesbian characters and gay characters that are upcoming in their movies, like Eternals and in Marvels, coming up and showing that on screen the way that they've shown straight characters like Tony Stark in the past. That's really important, but I'm really glad that it's here in the episode, in a very natural conversation.
Yeah, well, seeing that the main openly confirmed gay character in the MCU so far, like the literally only one that's openly there is one of the Russo brothers in Endgame.
Exactly, yeah.
So to date, I should say that, is the only one that has been actively, openly portrayed.
Yeah, and that character didn't even give a name.
No, he just went on a date.
Exactly.
And then hopefully was going on another date. I completely agree. As someone with no skin on this game, aside from you lovely gentlemen, this representation is fantastic no matter who, what, where, when, how. And it seems that happy coincidence, or I think the timing wise was probably happy coincidence. I don't think they're going to aim to have that moment come out in June. But I think the important thing, be it what was discussed and brought up in Falcon and the Winter Soldier, Captain America and the Winter Soldier, regarding race and all that type of, and then this, where in episode 1, where it was announced his gender was fluid within an episode 1, that even the main Loki variant that we are well used to, his gender is fluid. It was on episode 1 on the rap sheet from the TVA.
Yeah, but in a different way. That was screenshotted and put out there. Nobody mentioned it on screen. It's really important to me as a gay man when characters are called out as being a member of the LGBTQ plus community on TV shows, that it's done naturally, because you don't want it shoved in there. You don't want it forced in there. And in these conversations, it's in there. The character of Loki from Norse mythology is gender fluid. He can transfer to being male or female. So at least they have had that in the MCU. This is the character of Norse mythology turned into a comic book. So at least they've had that. But here, having it as part of a conversation, I think it's really important that it's called out in the right way and isn't forced on screen for everybody to see it. In other words, it's a conversation between two people and it doesn't really matter going forward. That's just who he is. And I think that's really important.
No, and I think, look, it was so well done and it was so well implemented within the writing and the narrative. I didn't even I didn't even notice it, but I was like, oh yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, right, we're moving on. They move out of the train.
Yeah. And just call out a note from Kate Herron, the director of this episode, and one of the showrunners effectively for the show. She made a note of this directly after the episode aired. She said from the moment she joined Loki Official, it was important for her and her goal to acknowledge that Loki was bisexual. It is part of who he is and who I am too. And I know it's a small step, but I'm happy. And my heart is so full to say that now it's canon in the MCU that Loki is bisexual. So I thought it was really positive that she called it out that way after the episode had aired, and just made sure that she was saying she wouldn't have been on board the project if they were ignoring it from now on, kind of thing. So I think that's important.
No, excellent stuff.
Love is love. Love who you want to love.
Absolutely. But yes, we get the battle. Both of them kicked off the train. Loki thrown out the window, missing his opportunity to take out all of the guards. So effectively this is all caused by him getting drunk.
Yeah.
And the guards, noticing, that he obviously isn't someone that's expecting to go to his death. He obviously isn't some rich guy. He's already taken off the uniform that was his cover, getting on board and spotted pretty quickly. But it was a fun moment when he just disappears out the window and Sylvie has to jump out the window after him.
Yeah, I like her little scream as well. That makes her feel better with just the little flash of green. I thought that was quite nice.
When they have their fight. After they meet up with each other.
Like, you idiot. And just the sort of, controlled scream of, sort of just pure frustration. And that she's got this, talking Loki.
And he smashed the TemPad after falling out of the train. Yeah.
But with that, on to Variant 4, because they now need to get to the Ark.
Yes.
Not for its power source anymore, but effectively to hijack it so they can at least attempt to get off this planet that is about to go, I was going to say apocalyptic, I guess.
Apocalyptic.
Apocalyptic, yes. Not apoplectic. No, I can't say it. Anyway, look, I'm not drunk. I'm full. I'll just say that again. So, yeah, I mean, they have to sort of go there. So they head on their way, to try and hijack then this Ark, which is taking primarily, you kind of figure, from some of the scenes, with the Blue Brigade as they're getting onto the train and with the crowd assembled there, that it's just the wealthy that are really getting shipped off Lamentis 1.
Yes, I wasn't sure whether that was just the train, because at the location where the Ark is, there's so many people there all trying to push on board and get on board the train. I think get on board the Ark, sorry, but it felt like definitely the train taking people to the Ark was only taking rich people at this stage. I guess they made it. I guess they made it because Loki and Sylvie would have walked there, whereas the train would have gotten there quite a bit of time ahead of that.
Yeah. Now, there was a little bit of time and space issues for me here, because they seem quite a long way away. And you could hear, but at the same time, you could hear the speakers, I guess, but it looked quite a long way, and it was 10 minutes until takeoff for the Ark. And by the time they get there, there's 5 minutes to go. And I kind of thought, okay, that timeline looks a little weird to me. And I was thinking, well, this is timey-wimey, spacey-wacy kind of stuff. But that also, for me, I just wonder, is this because he's enchanted? Because we saw the time jump with C20, and I thought maybe it's something to do with that, because otherwise it's one of those things, like, it's kind of like in a James Bond movie where the clock is, or actually, let's keep it in the Disney Plus family. It's like when, in New Hope, where the Death Star is counting down to firing its laser at, the planet where the rebel base is. And I always remember as a kid counting it and said, the Empire would have won. Because but it's just obviously shooting and all that kind of stuff. Yeah. But that was a little, the time felt a little off there, but I did wonder whether it was somehow connected to actually this situation that they're in.
Yeah. It's an odd one, isn't it? Because it feels like if it is the Enchantress that has enchanted Loki, that she would be pushing him in some direction. She'd be giving him some more information to get him on side for when he comes back. After being enchanted, if that's the situation, it feels like she's been so standoffish and not giving him any information to encourage him to join her fight or whatever it is that she would want him to do. So that does seem like a weird one, but you're right, that moment when they hear 10 minutes to go and they're there within 5 minutes, that feels like, okay, well, maybe they use their powers to jump from one place to the other,
maybe,
which they could have done after falling out of the train, and they wouldn't have had to walk that far. There is that reference from Loki as well in the walk. Why don't you enchant me? And then you can walk it, and I can fall asleep. Inside the body. So it'd be a great call out if that's actually what she'd done anyway.
The other interesting one, quickly, it did make me chuckle, was right at the start, just after you see Sylvie having enchanted C20, and you've got the banks of CCT cameras. But all I can say is one of those CCTV cameras was certainly being operated by Steven Spielberg, or dare I say it, by Kate Herron, because it was a very low angle shot for one of those cameras. That could be easily vandalized. But
walking past. Yeah.
It was for dramatic effect, but it was, it did make me laugh.
Yeah, I loved this arc scene because just the what do we call it? The run, the chase. It's not really a chase. The run to the Ark. was beautifully done. And it's all filmed and shot to look like a single cut.
Yes.
It has been confirmed that there's 3 hidden cuts.
Very good.
By the cinematographer for this episode. Just enjoyed the way it was, just the direction, the choice of the kind of the angles, the looks, and the way like they did it. And yeah, it was just fun. And you even get to see Loki essentially telekinetically hold a building with his magic, which is a bit more power than he's had before.
We have to talk about that, definitely.
Yes.
He not only held the building, but he reversed it back in place like as if he had a time stone, which he does not have.
Nope.
Unless he stole one from the TVA that was removed from a timeline and now it's working outside of the timeline, which I don't think he did, because there was no green light attached to it. He wasn't doing the Doctor Strange move to reverse time like we would have seen.
No, that's true.
But this possibly plays into John's theory that this is something that's in his mind.
Yep. It could be. I took it more as because he, within the comic books, he is known to have telekinetic powers. I took it as it was an additional. It was kind of like, hey, he's got powers. You're not going to ask questions later. Here you go. There you go. And he pushed the building.
And it's interesting. There's a lot of discussion between the two of them about what in the TVA and outside of the TVA about the powers and the types of powers that they've had. You've had that between Loki and Mobius. You've seen very powerful objects reduced to nothing more than paperweights. And then, this discussion about, because Sylvie in this is very much, you're a magician, and that's what she's calling him. Not a god.
It's perilous.
No, not a god of mischief or anything like that. Yeah. It's that you're a magician. And they're constantly sort of, trying to just probe about their powers. So yeah, this was really it seemed unexpected to me that he reversed this. And maybe it is something to do with the paperweights.
Yeah, but see, the problem with the paperweights, it has to be within that universe. With the many, he would have to have picked up, like a time stone from that drawer. Yeah. With the possibility that the Lamentis one universe, it works in that universe. Yeah. Yeah. Not one of the other multiple multiverses that they've got. Like that one for me, I took this as they needed a cool set piece, theoretically, that we've seen in some of the kind of, because we had seen this run in some of the trailers and things like that. Obviously, without Sylvie there, she was digitally removed in those trailers, which is interesting. Right. That's not really interesting. I just find it cool that they can actually cut people out and still make it look cool. I think they just overpowered his power set here to make it look cool. And I'm like, all right, just you kind of have to remember that now going forward.
Do you know how many months it takes to do CGI? I don't think this is in there for no reason. I think there's going to be an explanation for it. And if it's just, it's all happening in his mind because Sylvie's in control of him, these are the things that will stick out next week when we find out that piece of information. Maybe it's that. But for me, it's not just overpowered. 10 minutes beforehand, he was beaten up by 3 ticket collectors on a train and thrown out the window. And now he's able to stop a building and reverse it back on top of itself. Like, that's a massive difference in power set within 10 minutes. Maybe it is just the fig he pours happens to affect his powers much more than we expected. And now it's all worn off. So now he's able to use the full maximum of his powers to be able to reverse a building in time. But, he would need a cosmic stone to do that in the past, and now suddenly he's able to do it in a pinch.
He would need a cosmic Alka-Seltzer as well if he was that full. Yeah.
But it does all end with the Ark exploding and them not being able to get off the planet. So I thought it was interesting that Loki, when he arrives, he makes a kind of comment which seems more heroic than we've seen Loki in the past. He kind of arrives and looks at all the people around him and kind of says they're willing to let all these people die here. And it sounds like he's concerned for the people, which he's never really been up to this point in the movies. Never really been concerned about other people's welfare, which I just thought was interesting that he calls it out there. But then it turns out that the only people that survive, because everybody that's aboard the Ark, I guess, dies in the explosion. Well, we know they do because it's an apocalypse. That's part of the reason why they're hiding in this planet, and because nobody survives. So anybody that they've interacted with wouldn't know who they are.
Yeah, so. And it does explode, but I mean, it looked to me like it was a meteorite just coming down and slicing it in half as well. Right. And then all the explosions resulting from that, rather than it trying to take off and something was wrong, you know?
Right.
Because as well, the moon splitting, you know, the big
looked amazing.
It was really, really cool. Yeah, I loved it. So kind of really beautiful, I guess. Even though apocalyptic.
Hey,
bit like I guess a mushroom cloud.
True. I enjoyed this. More just because it sets up how did they get out of this scrape? Fade to black. And again, just love the choice by Disney that, hey, they're going to leave. We are hanging for 7 days now, folks. Like, that's absolutely. It. Like, love it. My gut tells me that there'll be a 30-second clipper kind of that come out on Tuesday next week. Kind of like find out how they escape, and there'll be one or two, like, because they're doing a lot of commercials at the moment on the socials. Okay, that's what the kids say.
I am glad I've been avoiding all of those because I'm constantly surprised every week by what's going on. But maybe Loki did use a stone of power, and that's how they're going to track him down. That this use of the stone of power has kind of broken that protection that they have in an apocalyptic event, maybe by using the time stone, if that's what he did. That's how they track him, you know. There's a couple of possibilities. Obviously, the fact that they had tracked Sylvie down by using all of the apocalypses around the time. Do they have something else that Mobius could use to track down Loki, another connection that might be a place that he thinks they're hiding, you know? Although they didn't go there on purpose, it was accidental. So I don't know whether that's a way. Maybe they just have a tracker on the device. She'd been there multiple times before, but apparently she'd been to all the apocalypses multiple times before. Yeah. So, because that's how she scans them out effectively. So is there a tracker on that particular device that because they went from the TVA to there that maybe they can find her? But I do think that's going to be the saving point, because unless Loki has another TemPad somewhere, and that the broken TemPad was just a joke, I don't think there's a way out of it other than having Mobius and the TVA find them there.
Yeah, pretty much.
So, yeah.
I very much in agreement there.
Speaking of setup for the rest of the season, I suppose, there's one line in the episode which is a massive moment really for the series, which definitely is our final variant. It's where Sylvie reveals who all of the hunters are. Everybody that works for the TVA is a variant just like them, taken out of time for a reason. Like, they arrived in work late one day and they were taken out of the timeline and put to work in the TVA. And it seems like none of them know it. Nobody knows it at all, really, it seems. What do you guys think of this as the big reveal? Like, I suppose we saw a little bit of it with Mobius being connected to the 90s. He seems to think that the perfect time in history when form and function came together to create a jet ski in the 90s, which makes you think maybe that's where he's from originally. So he has some kind of memories in his mind that are breaking out from him. Renslayer, for example, picking up all those trinkets from all of the things that her agents are going out and doing across the timeline. Is that her connection to it? Or are there other people working for who are bringing back trinkets from their life to her potentially? But that seems like every single person, kind of like I said last week, this idea that there's some kind of slavery going on effectively. They're being brought to the TVA and made work for them. Is that what Judge Renslayer is doing? Is she wiping their mind and making them work? Would that have been what happened to Loki? Potentially, or would they have just wiped them from the timeline? Yeah, and the whole nefariousness of the Timekeepers, like you have mentioned from the previous episodes about the situation seems odd. Are they preserving something, or are they trying to maintain something that maintains their own power and fate or destiny? Yeah. So it's like that's really interesting then, because it opens up quite a lot of possibilities. I guess in particular it's going to be with Mobius. So that
I thought this was a nice little reveal, for sure.
Yeah, and Loki seemed very concerned about the idea that they don't know this as well.
Yeah.
He's taken aback by the reveal itself, but he seems to have made a bit of a friend with Mobius. He's kind of made some kind of connection with the character. And he's concerned that Mobius would not know this about himself, effectively. So again, we're seeing a bit more heroic Loki, I think, from that moment.
Yeah, they are very much building him up now as the self-confessed anti-hero of the Asgardian side. It's going to be great. Going forward, he will be, in the next few phases, he will be a hero. In terms of this reveal, I loved it. I will talk about what I said in the last episode when you brought this up, in that in the comic books, they're clones.
Right.
So they are literally made by the TVA. They are, Mobius is one of hundreds of Mobius clones. So I thought that was going to be the reveal, which is they went into another building, within the TVA, and there would be another Mobius and another clerk and like all of the same actors just playing different characters. I thought that was going to be it. Like each building had the same amount of clones, etc. So they never crossed. This is more nefarious. This and leans heavily into the theory that the TVA are bad guys, or are kind of have been subverted. Maybe the reptile gods are no longer there, and they are being controlled by different space gods, or it's a different person controlling, or it is them. It is all about them keeping the prime timeline, the sacred timeline, so that they come to power, or
their chosen timeline that they're choosing to call the sacred timeline. Yeah, but they're taking everybody out of time and making them work for them effectively. So it's a really cool reveal. I really want to see how that plays out in the next couple of episodes. I think that's it for the overall points for the episode. Any notes for the episode? I just have the one, just really impressive, little sci-fi Easter egg in there. Two of the Lamentis guards that are talking to Loki and Sylvie are called out in the credits as Corporal Hicks and Private Hudson. Reference to two of my favourite characters in all of sci-fi, two characters from Aliens, one played by Michael Biehn and one played by Bill Paxton.
Yeah.
Game over, man, as the most famous line, I think, from all of Aliens, other than get away from her, you... Oh no, I can't say that in this podcast. But
no, you can't.
One of the more famous lines in
batch.
all of sci-fi. You bad batch, yeah. But yes, delivered by Bill Paxton, who played Private Hudson in Aliens. So I love that they've done a little reference to Aliens in here.
Same, absolutely.
Yeah, definitely. It's got my sci-fi juices flowing.
There you go.
But there we have it, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, fellow defenders around the globe. We have come to the end of our variants, so that means one thing. The final question of this episode. Derek, do you defend this episode of Loki? Lamentis.
I do. I think it was the right impetus, and having these conversations was really important. Learning more about Sylvie was really important. Execution, I think there's a couple of things I didn't like. Initially with Loki and Sylvie, where he's taking his knives out and back and flicking his hair back and forward. It just happens too many times in the scene, so it just felt a bit weird, the scenes and how they were written. And then Sylvie's insistence, don't call me Loki, don't call me Variant, my name is Sylvie. It's not enough of a reveal. It makes people go and Google who Sylvie is in comic books and connect it to Enchantress. But if she'd said, I'm Sylvie, Laufey daughter, born on the same planet as you, and I wasn't taken by Odin, if she revealed her backstory in those scenes, I think it would have worked. Because I don't want this to happen again. I don't want them to have the same conversation in future. Tell me more of your backstory. This was the time to do it. You have an episode here where she has the ability to give you all of the information of who she actually is. You can guess what her plan is. She doesn't need to give us too much more of that, but this was the moment to do it. And I think that's why I think it didn't work as well as it could have in execution. But that said, I'm a massive Doctor Who fan. This is Doctor Who with a massive budget. I'm a massive Rick and Morty fan. This is live action Rick and Morty on screen, so in the MCU. So they did a really good job of that part of it, I think, overall. But I do defend the episode. It wouldn't be my favourite of the season so far.
Excellent. John, do you defend this episode of Loki?
Yeah, I do. I do defend it, but I'd give it 3.5 Figgy ports out of 5. I think similar to Derek in some respects. Like, the first time I watched it, I just kind of didn't quite click with it, to be honest. It was mainly because of that opening. It felt like it was really good, and then it got into sort of get to know one another, and it definitely needs that for these two characters for sure. But I just feel they could have done that in the TVA, to be honest. As I say, there's plenty of big action movies and so on where there's that quiet moment of downtime where they do. And I think, as you say, it could have just been a bit more efficient with, getting to know you. Who are you? Why are you called Sylvie? And rather than, there's reveals, isn't there? And then there's kind of, I guess, reveals. And I don't necessarily think that the mystery around Sylvie now needs to be maintained around some of the details that she could have given in this episode.
Like, she basically could have said, "My name's Sarah," or "My name's Brandy," or "My name," whatever name she said. She literally didn't reveal anything.
And unless it's going to be like in WandaVision with Agatha, or she is in fact Mephisto.
Heard it here, folks, first.
I am joking. Then, I'm just kind of like, it seems like, to me, they've pointed it firmly at the Timekeepers and their role in what's coming, in the future episodes. But I love the interaction with them. I like some of the stuff that they talked about. I thought Lamentis was an incredibly visualized planet here. Really, really enjoyed it. And I loved some of the gags along the way as well, in particular with the old lady and the big blaster. I liked that a lot. But Chris, after my 3.5 Figgy ports out of 5, do you defend this episode of Loki? Episode 3, Lamentis.
I'm right there with you folks. I'm probably a bit more dour on it. Just because for me, it felt like they did slam on the brakes. And I'm not in a, like, they did something interesting with that time. They just, in my opinion, didn't do enough. And I think that's the problem. Like, if you are going to build up this, essential, if they built it up to the elevator, the music's like sung and everything, kind of the crescendos, and the angels started singing and everything was like big battles and people were dying. Well, 2 people died, and I was like, oh, this is like, and this is the reveal, and this is going to set up the big bad. And then they just kind of, I say this on break, they dropped us through a time door into another planet, into an apocalypse. And I was like, cool, okay, you're going here. This is going to be, I made the joke, walking simulator. This is going to be a walk to the Ark, to their solution, and we're going to get the backstory of this variant. Oh, we got Sylvie. Okay, cool. On the train, we're going to get, oh no, we get more about Loki. Okay, maybe oh no. Okay. Like, there's all these just little things. And I was like, I'm willing to trust that potentially this will pay off.
Absolutely.
Like, they've done this in other shows, and again, like in Fahey we trust. The guiding forces on this usually have an understanding of, they've done this for so long. They've done it on feature films and they've done it on TV shows. I think this will pay off. I just think it potentially could have been utilized slightly better. I think that's potentially, like, they could given us a bit more to sink our teeth into, because now again, what you do have is our fellow defenders and the wider audience now going Sylvie, Enchantress, Loki, comic books. Like, people now are Googling the hell out of this, and they're going to we're going to have a Mephisto again, where people are going to make up storylines for the next 6 days, 5 days. And then when that does not come, we will get like, oh, she's not that. Okay, well, And it's just, if they had have given us a bit more, as you said, like literally, my name is Sylvie Lokinson and I am an Odinson too, but Laufenson was my mother and actually blah, 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 blah. Like, just give us a small tidbit more. So I'm very much middle of the road, but willing to very much see where this goes because I'm enjoying the journey. I enjoy the overpowered time change of a building.
Yeah. We'll never jump off a show in the middle unless it's Jupiter's Legacy. We would have jumped off that halfway through if we were doing our podcast about it. But yeah, like obviously we're going to see it play out. I think.
Yes, of course.
I think all of us are in agreement. It's the execution in the episode where you have a moment with these two characters together. Give us a little bit more. Let them tell each other all of their information, not just connect on about their mothers. I suppose is all.
But do you know what would go really good with a bit of figgy port? A bit of champagne. So let's head to the pub. Gentlemen, let's head on over to our ever so popular pub quiz. John, what do you got?
Yes, fellow figgy friends, fellow quizzers, fellow defenders, it is the pub quiz. Grab a little glass of port whilst you ruminate on question 3 for episode 3 Lamentis, or even if you are watching the episode again to get the answer. A bit of port maybe, and something to pair nicely with it as well.
I love that Loki was going to lick that off.
I know, exactly.
It's so nicely with the figgy port.
With a trampled train carpet. Yes.
Sounds tasty, Loki.
You wouldn't do that on Virgin trains, I guess. But yes, question 3. Loki and Sylvie are taking the train to the Ark, but where on Lamentis 1 is the Ark located?
I can tell by your slight hesitation there you almost read out the answer again.
I did.
Why don't you give us the question again one more time?
Yes. Loki and Sylvie are taking the train to the Ark, but where on Lamentis 1 is the Ark located?
Name of the town.
Yes, the name that is in there. It is in there. All these questions have got answers that all you need to do is watch Loki again. It's great stuff. Great TV that you watch again just to get an answer for some great prizes, that we're still trying to find.
Yeah. There's just so much choice out there. Like Loki's been a character in the Marvel universe for 12 years now.
Yeah.
You know, so there are some T-shirts being released for the show at the moment. There are some Funko Pops, of course, because they come out with every single show. There's only 2 that have been revealed at the moment. One is Mobius and one's Loki, obviously. So we haven't decided whether it's just going to be Funko Pops again, as we've been doing for the other Marvel shows, or whether we'll pick up something else. But there will be great prizes. We do always give away great goodies over on TV Podcast Industries for our pub quiz. So get your answers into us to feedback@tvpodcastindustries.com. Either now, one at a time as the episodes go through, or at the end of the season, you can put together all 6 and send them into us within that week after the episodes have finally aired.
Fantastic. Well, gentlemen, another thing that we do love to get here outside of the pub quiz answers is feedback. So let's jump on over to our feedback that we've received for this episode. First up is an email from Victor on episode 2 this time. Hail, Derek, Chris, John, and fellow defenders. I continue to enjoy the sparring between Loki and Mobius, as well as the byplay with B-15. I love her.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I know a little of Lady Loki from the Dark Reign, and she still scares me. If I may ask a technical question, why does the TVA cling to rotary phones, CRTs, videotapes, and hard copies, as well as other ancient tech? It seems like some kind of clue. As always, enjoying your podcast and wonderful Defenders feedback.
Wow, that makes me feel so old, Victor, saying the TVA are clinging to rotary phones, CRTs and videotape and hard copies and other ancient That feels
I know.
specifically made to make us feel.
I remember all of those things. I don't remember the stone tablet or the invention of the wheel, though. I am not that old.
I remember them in working order, not just in some kind of scientific museum.
And the rotary phones that had the lock on because everyone's parents were the phone bill was racking up.
Yeah. If you talk too long on the phone with your friends. Why do they cling on to them? I think we kind of know it's kind of revealed in this episode that because people are plucked from their own timeline, maybe that's part of the reason. It makes them more productive workers to work with things that they used to use in their normal lives. Yeah. That's possibly it. Also, it looks really cool, and it's a real Jetsons thing. It's a real reference to old sci-fi from the 60s and 70s that would use technology, even though it's set 2,000 years ahead of when that technology.
Yeah, it's difficult to know. I still think it's a stylistic thing, for sure. But
what's the line from the episode? What makes Loki different? It's style, isn't it? It's all about style.
Well, we do know it is stylistic because from episode 2, Miss Minutes jumps out as a hologram. From the CRT computer, the old computer. But there we are, Victor. Thank you so much.
Because I have one behind me right now. I do not.
Clack, clack, clack. Thank you so much, Victor. Appreciate it as always for your feedback. I should say Victor Van Doom.
Yeah, thanks, Victor.
And we also got some feedback, this time a voicemail from Steve Brown on episode 2.
Oh no, it's the return of the Loki Pokey staff. Oh, or as Kevin Smith called it. Hey, this is Steve, guys, and I've just started my first watch of Loki episode 2. Wow, another really good episode of Loki. I hope I get this to you guys in time. I don't remember what you said, when you said you'd be recording, for feedback, but, man, I love that opening, that attack, and the Bonnie Tyler song playing was great. The reveal, the female Loki, I think you guys, said something about that last week. It was possibly a female Loki. And, Mark and I talked about how the horned creature was reminiscent of, the helmet that, Loki wore. So now we understand why that was in the stained glass, window at the church. And, can't wait to see where this goes next week. I'm going to have to watch this one multiple times. All right. Can't wait to hear you guys talk about it. Later.
Thanks so much, Steve. I hope you're feeling much better. I know you weren't very well during the week this week, but great to hear your thoughts on that on episode 2. That's a good connection. We didn't really go back and say that in the first episode. We were talking about the window that looked like a devil, effectively, and kind of joking that it was Mephisto, of course. But yeah, the horns on its head are the same as we see now on Sylvie's head and on her helmet, effectively, which she uses in a fight in the fight on the train. I love that she took that off and stabbed someone in the neck with it. It was really cool.
Do you remember in Ragnarok, Loki uses his horns as a weapon on the bridge, the Rainbow Bridge, at the fight at the end. So it is on point for Loki to use it as a weapon. Sylvie does it in this one as well, in this episode.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've not heard, the Loki Pokey, staff, at all. So, maybe some new lyrics to, Don't Break My Heart, my Loki Pokey heart, or something like that. I don't know.
That's much better than Do the Loki Pokey, which is
that is true. There is that one as well. But I was thinking because he hid the TemPad in his heart, or so he said.
Very good.
Whether that's the case, I don't know. But great stuff. Thanks, Steve, for the feedback. We also have another email here on episode 3 from Jerry. Jerry says, "Hey guys. This episode was interesting. Very Doctor Who. Very cute Doctor Who Easter egg in the train dialogue. Sylvie's backstory still needs more fleshing out. What I find disappointing is the internet is only interested in the fact that Loki is bisexual. So what? It does not move narrative of the story or how I see the character past, present or future. TVA using mind-wipe variants. How many Mobius variants are there in the TVA? Visually awesome episode, soundtrack equally awesome. Jerry in Niceville. Thanks so much, Jerry. Yeah, definitely. I think visually this was pretty cool. And very Doctor Who, as we said. I'm not entirely sure know which Easter egg from Doctor Who it is on the train. So definitely, if you could fill us in on that, that would be great. I'll have to go and watch it again and try and listen and remember very intently.
I was actually trying to catch it the second time I watched it, or the time I watched it after getting your feedback in, Jerry, and I didn't notice it. Damn it.
Yeah, no, I just took it as the Doctor and the companion kind of talking, but that yes, please let us know, Jerry.
Yeah, there must be something in the dialogue itself, I'd say, but please let us know, Jerry. As for the bisexual reveal and the discussions on the internet, we've said before, you can find people on the internet hating on something or loving something, whatever you're looking for. I think it's quite a massive thing after having how many characters are in the MCU now, 50, 60 characters, and having at least one of them speak to the fact that they're bisexual. And the entire point is that it doesn't make any difference to the character, or their past, present, or future, and how we see them. But it does for some people. It will for some bisexual people. Seeing the representation of themselves on screen will make a difference to them. So I think it's really important to have that representation in the MCU. So I'm glad it's there.
Yeah, and definitely, as we'd said, I think Sylvie's backstory is still there to be fleshed out as well. Like we said, despite a little bit of reveal in this episode. So thanks.
But I do agree, Jerry. I wish it had been fleshed out in this episode, because there's a perfect opportunity there.
Yeah. So thanks, Jerry, for the email.
Mm-hmm. Over on Facebook, we have some feedback from Heather Wallace, who simply said, I want some figgy port. If it makes me sing awesome Asgardian songs, I'd take some figgy port. But that was the other song this had me singing, was We All Want Some Figgy Pudding.
Yeah, I was saying
the second
for me.
Verse of what?
It's a Christmas hymn, isn't it, or something, or carol, I should say. I think, but
We Wish You a Merry Christmas. It's the second verse of We Wish You a Merry Christmas.
We all want some figgy pudding.
Mm-hmm. And bring it right now. And it is absolutely sung in caroling time every year, and I don't understand it. But anyway, a very old phrase. Also over on Facebook, Dan Lee says, lots to digest. Wasn't a fan of the shorter runtime this episode. Just seemed to stop dead. I enjoyed the chemistry between Loki and Sylvie, although I'm left wondering which one of them will be the first to betray the other. TVA agents are variants that don't know it. Shady. Also, when Loki used his powers to stop that bit of building from falling, did anyone else think that he just used the time stone? The way the building almost seemed to reverse itself. Another thing to add, the Loki power scales seem to be so inconsistent. 1 minute he's a badass firing green bolts and taking down everyone, and the next he's being tossed out of a window by a couple of guards. Excellent, Dan. Yeah, I think we talked about a lot of those at those points of the episode. So yes, we did think, did he use the time stone on that bit of building? And I really don't know the power balance there. I wonder if John's got John's theory it holds even more weight after that discussion.
Yeah, it did. Who knows? We'll just have to wait and see, because it'll be interesting, because it felt weird for Loki. It's almost like you would expect him to vanish like he did with the TemPad, and move himself, rather than he kind of did the sort of, Bruce Almighty pose where he kind of put his arms back, like he was taking off his clothes. Yeah, exactly. And then the building just went up, presumably at the sight of his six pack or something. That's
not all he showed off.
It's like, oh my goodness, this fleshy human is way too strong for me to crush him. Fleshy god, I guess. But definitely the power was a little weird, for sure. Yeah.
Yes. No, I agree. Still over on the Books of Faces, we have feedback from Elizabeth Nikolajevic, who said, well, we're finding Sylvie is a mashup of Lady Loki and Sylvie Lushington, the second Enchantress. But she is a variant of the God of Mischiefs from a branch timeline. So she is Loki. Loki has always been gender fluid in the MCU. And now it's like a Batman and Robin caper. How are they going to get out of this predicament? Which they no doubt will. Has Loki stolen the Time Stone as well? Thank you so much, Elizabeth. Yep. It seems to be an amalgamation of those two characters, as well as being an actual variant in the MCU. So it'll be interesting to see what they do with this.
Absolutely, and I guess we'll find out how they get out of this predicament. Same Loki time, Same Loki channel next week.
Yeah, no, it's a good thing. Really interesting, Elizabeth, because actually your feedback's made me kind of think, if he had the time stone, could he have done like Doctor Strange did with the apple? So he could use it to actually restore the TemPad and, in fact, charge it. So, like, in that sense, so I guess then he's certainly got an exit plan if he didn't do that. And maybe, the tactical advantage then here, whereas he's suggesting it's Sylvie is getting all the knowledge, and learning about Loki, that maybe he's doing it, instead in a slightly different way.
Maybe. Yeah. It seems like an odd one, doesn't it? I think the drawer full of Infinity Stones was just to show when things are taken out of the timeline, they no longer have their power. I think that's all it was supposed to show. So I don't think it was a smoking gun they were planting in episode 1, and then by episode 6, Loki's going to be walking around with his fistful of rings of power, basically.
But it could be like episode 4 opens up because you see Loki still stood there as the arc has just been split in half and the moon has just effectively fractured in, and he could just simply reverse it, and the moon goes back, avoiding the apocalypse, sending every TVA agent in the entire multiverse to that point.
Interesting.
Wow.
Yes. There we are.
It won't happen, of course, but nonetheless.
No, but we only have 5 days to wait and see.
There you go. Also over on Facebook, Alan Thomas says, I know this is a nitpick, but it bugged me. Edge of town. In which direction? You're not telling me a whole lot just by edge. This is the direction from the lady who's protecting her homestead, sends Loki and Sylvie to edge of town. I would presume they had walked through the town to get to her, so they knew it wasn't one edge. They knew it was the edge that had the train at it.
But which edge?
She says where the train is. The train is at the edge of town, so I presume you're aiming towards a train station. But yeah, it's economy of script, definitely, Alan. Greg Schwam also says, I'm sorry, did we hear the announcement ship is leaving in 10 minutes as they were still walking up to the edge of the city or town? This seemed like a really far way to walk or run in 5 minutes. I like the Loki Sylvie conversations and the train fight, but I don't know if it was my TV or what. The special effects CGI during the continuous city chase just didn't look up to Marvel standards. Maybe you guys covered it in the podcast, but what do you think the significance of the telescopic views where the corners are shaded and it looks like we are watching through a viewfinder? Interesting, Greg. Didn't see any of those scenes through the telescopic views. I probably have to watch the episode again, or else.
Yeah, definitely need to see that, because that could
maybe send us a screenshot, because I also didn't notice the CGI being a bit off Marvel standards in the city chase. So maybe it is your TV settings, Greg.
Yeah, I hate to say that, Greg. I think, but no, send us a screenshot, because if there was telescopic view, that would lend credence to John's theory 100%, because then it'd be literally like the CCTV. Mm-hmm. Literally you pan out and that's that.
Yeah, and that would be awesome, actually. I would quite like that if just subtly there had been at the corners some kind of that telescopic sort of fuzz and shade to it. Now, I haven't noticed it, but it's kind of almost like a stylistic choice of the Timekeepers watching over different things or something like that. That could be kind of really just a nice little touch. I mean, it's a stylistic choice for the director and the showrunner in that sense. But certainly just kind of how they did it with WandaVision with all the stylistic choices. I mean, that was obviously more upfront, but I like that idea, but I haven't noticed it at all, Greg.
No, and I have a CX LG 4K bells and whistles Dolby Surround Sound TV, and looked up the scratches to me, not gonna lie. The chase scene, it looked very nice. It was slightly darker than usual, but that was more so that the neon pops in certain elements of that scene. But there you go.
Yeah.
All Chris said was words and numbers there. That's all I...
Yeah, no, exactly. That was a new language coming from Chris, I think. Yeah, thanks, Greg, for the feedback. Ray Pod says, a really interesting episode in that it puts the two adversaries in an apocalyptic situation, none of which gets resolved at the end. It gave it a real sense of weight to the episode that Loki and Sylvie were desperately trying to escape a doomed situation. It's interesting, we almost get an enchantress here. Comic readers will recognize Sylvie as an enchantress, but she seems to be an amalgam with Lady Loki too. Interesting to see where this goes as to how they get off this apocalyptic situation. I can only think that Loki has pulled a trick and still has a TemPad up his sleeve. That absolutely, Ray, would be the simplest explanation, is that maybe he's got two of them. Rather than time stones or enchantment. So I think you may have kind of done the Gordian knot thing there and sliced through our complicated theories.
But he would have used it earlier, though, if he had.
I think so.
Yeah,
I think so,
too. He
too.
would have used it before now. He wouldn't want to walk all that way from the train all the way to there.
Yeah, I think so, for sure.
He's very lazy as Loki.
Definitely. Yeah, this is all interesting, this possible amalgam between the Enchantress and Lady Loki. This could, and with her also saying that she has been hunted by the TVA really early on, that actually, in the sense that Sylvie hasn't veered from or branched the timeline more, she is a threat to the Timekeepers' sacred timeline that they're looking to preserve. So it could be actually an old switcheroo in that sense.
Yeah.
Thanks, Ray.
Yeah, thanks,
Thank
Ray.
you so much, Ray. Our final piece of Facebook feedback comes from Lara Willie Swink, who said, I never knew Loki had such a lovely singing voice. While I like the Loki and Sylvie interactions, I felt the absence of Owen Wilson in this episode. Hopefully our awkward time cop duo is not separated for long. Nice to see Loki reunited with his true love, his twin daggers. And did Loki have telekinetic powers that we've seen before? I know while in the Dark World, he did magically throw all the furniture in his prison cell with a magic tantrum, but I don't think we've ever seen him stop a falling building, much less levitate it back in place. Yes, true. Thanks, Lara. They've kind of overpowered him, or it's going to be he's like, oh no, I'm spent. My magic is done because I have overdone it, and I can't cast any more magic for half an hour.
And another building to the left falls down. Yeah. It does seem interesting. It's an interesting one you point out as well, Lara, about the Dark World. I was trying to remember that scene. It's when he's stuck in the prison cell and his prison looks perfect. And then the sheen is wiped off and he's actually, is all broken down. All the furniture in there is all thrown around him, isn't it? I don't know whether do we see the tantrum of him throwing something?
I think so. I think I do recall that, like the one that Lara references here for sure. And I think, I actually hadn't really thought about it for some weird reason, but I think, the absence of Owen Wilson here, it could be you may have hit the nail on the head here for me a bit. I think I was struggling to kind of find why, but I know last week I loved their interaction and their just at one another throughout the whole of the episode and working together. I really liked that. And of course, they've kind of had that separation now. So, I guess maybe it was a bit of reminiscing as well, from, the previous episode. So, that's a good call there, Lara. Thanks, so much. Yeah.
Absolutely. Thanks to everybody that sent in all your feedback. We also have some two final voicemails. We have a voicemail in from Steve Brown on episode 3.
Oh, come on. You're going to end it right there? The arc blows up? Hey guys, it's Steve. I hope I get this in time. It is Thursday morning here, so I'm not sure when you guys record, but just finished first time watching episode 3, and wow, that's kind of a cliffhanger ending. I'm hoping maybe there's a post-credit scene, but yeah, I guess not. I do have one question, and I'm going to have to ask it when why did the guards in the city attack them? Just because they weren't returning to their homes? There's no way, unless the guards in the city were the same ones from the train and recognized them, but why would they have been in the city? Why wouldn't they have been on the Ark? I don't know. So anyway, yeah, really good. I love this interaction between Sylvie and Loki, because it's just fun to see. I love the whole talk about love, and did you have someone waiting for you, and what about the princesses or a prince, and all that was just great. Just their whole interaction and everything was really fun. Loved the scene at the shack. I think that's probably my favorite scene, when she gets shot and then he tries his way and he gets shot and she's like, which one was that? And he's like, no, don't even. So yeah, anyway, can't wait to watch it again and hear you guys talk about it. All right, talk to you later.
Thanks so much, Steve. Yeah, thank you. We all felt that at the end, which was, oh, that's the end. Oh, okay, maybe there's going to be post-credit. Maybe that's it. No. Ooh. Yeah. That was literally, I watched all the way through. I even watched through the Disney Plus, localized language version credits. I was like, maybe they're really, they're going in on it and they're going to make you watch all the way to see all the multiple people that have had to do different versions, make you work for your, kind of post-credit. No? Okay. Interesting.
Yeah, that would be a deeply buried post-credit indeed. That would be for fanatics, Chris.
We are, though.
Well, thanks. I'm glad to know I have a name. That is exactly what I do.
They are still doing that thing, though, on Disney Plus, when you watch through the credits, that the time that it shrinks down to the corner of the screen is when the cast list comes up and the actors who played the cast. I'm so annoyed with this. I wish they'd moved that by 10 seconds more. Whoever's programming Disney Plus, that cuts the cast to the bottom corner. Surely there's all these people at home that worked on the show and are going, Mom, look, here comes my credit on the screen. Look, it's disappeared. Oh, now I have to grab the remote and click the button on it and stuff.
No, it's okay, son and daughter. Just get the magnifying glass. Look, we'll look at your hard work down in the corner there.
It's it's the one piece of the show I want to know after the episode is who made it and who started it and who acted in it, basically. So, So I'm surprised they do it there.
Yes, but I also think they're doing it now because so many leaks have happened from in the credits.
Maybe,
they're like, hide them, no one will know.
Yeah, and good call, Steve, on the guards in the city. I was thinking that they didn't really value their life because basically everything was crumbling around them, and rather than fleeing, they were still being very protective of the Ark, which...
Hold the line, John. Hold the line.
Yeah, I guess it was really. And the Shack's scene, I'm right there with you on that one. So yeah, thanks so much, Steve. We have one final voicemail from, Matt Murdoch, on about the TVA theme from Loki.
Yeah, absolutely. We love Matt's breakdown of the music for these shows. He's been doing it on his own podcast, and he thankfully does send in his breakdowns for the themes, on
which is really nice.
It's a really nice one. Yeah, take it away, Matt.
Hello, Derek, John, and Chris. This is Matt from across the pond. Hope you guys are well. Hope you guys are enjoying Loki as much as I am. I love Loki. That's a double L, and I really love the way that Natalie Holt is approaching this score. I first experienced her scoring with a television show called Nightfall, where she took over in the second season and really applied some great textures to the score of that show and some real innovations just in the way that she used harmony to make you feel certain ways. And I want to talk about that, but I've got a lot to talk about, so I'll probably break this up into 2 different MP3s for you guys, and maybe submit one this week and one for next week so that I'm not yammering the whole time. I'm sure there's tons of other great feedback that you guys need to get through. I'm going to focus on a cut that's actually been released on Spotify. It's the music that you hear during the ending credits and kind of the main theme of the show. It's titled TVA for our favorite new S.H.I.E.L.D. agency. And it's very ominous, very big, very huge. But I really only want to talk about the harmony of it this time around, and we'll talk about other things that are important to me, like melodic shape and timbre, meaning the instruments, and rhythm as well, which is very important into the way that plays into time. I'll do that next time. Anyway, I've yammered enough. We can examine the harmony in both parts of this theme as it is played, but especially in the intro. I'm talking about this part right here. It has that one ostinato figure which just repeats over and over. But the most important thing that makes that very effective harmonically is the key that it's set in. So the root of the key, or what feels most like home, like the place that the key is centered in, is C sharp minor, this. And the fact that it's minor is very, very, very important. A long time ago, a gentleman by the name of Pythagoras, who you may know for his triangle work, actually tried to apply math to a whole lot of things, including music. And his discoveries are things that composers continue to use today. One of those things being that minor chords or minor keys make us feel more serious than major keys, which make us feel resolved and lighter. To exemplify that, I am now, after you've already heard me play the piece as it is, I'm going to play it for you as if it were in major instead of minor. If it was in D flat major instead of C sharp minor, this is what it would sound like. Not nearly as ominous as the other version, right? Yeah, it kind of feels a little lighter. And these are the kinds of things that Pythagoras discovered as he worked with math and music. Something else that he worked is the distance between notes is what creates those kinds of feelings of uncomfortableness with us. The interesting thing that he found was that the more symmetrical, or when the distance of the notes is closer to being exactly the same, the more uncomfortable we get. Now, you would think that symmetry would make us feel better, but it doesn't. We like asymmetry. Major chords are much less symmetrical than, say, diminished chords, which are completely symmetrical. And diminished chords often make us feel fear. And a lot of that line that we hear running in between the big chords actually also creates a tension that the chords then try to release for us. Again, if we're in this key, that ostinato line that we hear never feels like it actually gets home to that root. It never feels like it actually gets home. It feels like it wants to get home, but it doesn't ever get there. If you think of the score for any of the Halloween movies, same kind of principle. But then we also have the other part of that little figure, this one. And the distance between those notes, what we call an interval in the biz, is a tritone. And you don't need to know these terms, but the whole idea is that a tritone is perfectly symmetrical within all of the notes available to you within a scale. And what happens there is it never feels resolved until you put some kind of resolution on it. Again, if you're in this key, then I could actually keep playing that interval of a tritone over and over and over and over, and it would drive you crazy until I resolved it. Yeah, I can't leave that like that. I gotta resolve it. Whew. Okay, I feel better now. My point being is that these are the kinds of conventions that have been used for a very long time, but Natalie Holt uses them very, very well for this final theme because, goodness gracious, this is a mess This whole time skewing thing. And who are these Time Lords and what all this? There's a lot of tension in the story. So she creates that tension in the music, in the main theme. My friends, I have yammered enough. Thanks to your listeners for tolerating me. Thanks to you guys for tolerating me. Hope you continue to enjoy the series. I know I will. I'll try and do a second part for your next podcast. Take care.
Thank you so much, Matt. Great to hear your thoughts. Matt Murdoch there from the Double P Podcast Network. I love that you tried to drive us mad by not resolving the notes there in your in your piece. But that is really fascinating. Anybody else hear the Halloween theme now?
Oh, definitely.
Instantly hear the Halloween theme when you pointed it out there, Matt. That's really interesting.
Yes, thank you so much, Matt. All I can hear is triangles. I honestly did not know Pythagoras did this, so it's really interesting.
You can now hear triangles.
Well, I can now hear triangles. Not just
Maybe
see
Matt has driven you mad.
I mean, but that's it. I mean, it's interesting, like, with timing and so on, music's always been, to me, has that mathematicalness around timing and rhythm and so on. But certainly with the Pythagoras element, and even just like the idea of more symmetrical, makes you more uncomfortable. It almost feels to me linking in from a chemistry point of view around, like, which is also, it's a mathematical equation in terms of entropy, that generally highly symmetrical things will tend to, have a low entropy, and it will tend towards high entropy, which is effectively going into sort of destruction and aging and more chaotic. So, I think that's really interesting, because that would make you feel, I get, that idea would make you feel, uncomfortable. Like a lot of the stuff in nature, it's actually fractal or it's chaotic. It's so, that looks natural.
Yeah.
I guess.
Really good. I think that's a good note to end on, though.
I was going to say, the entropy of this podcast has come to an end. We are in the final phase of this podcast. Yes, thank you so much for your feedback. Thank you, Matt. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, all fellow defenders. We are at the end. If you want to hear more from us, you know what you can do. Head on over to tvpodcastindustries.com and make sure you subscribe. If you want to hear your dulcet tones on the podcast, you can send it to feedback@tvpodcastindustries.com, but also just send us an email, whatever you want. We'll throw it all. You can also head on over to Facebook and we will pull it from there. Yes, thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen. We love your support. We love your feedback, but you can also support us for an intergalactic credit or an Infinity Stone by heading on over to patreon.com/tvpodcastindustries, and we will gladly take it. Or you can head on to buymeacoffee.com/tvpi, where you can keep, since we're going to be doing a lot of editing this week, you can keep our editor-in-chief, the fantastic Derek, in coffee, because he needs it. We will be back later this week with the next episode of Bad Batch. Oh yes, it's Bad Batch episode 9, and who knows where they're going to lead that one. But we'll also be back the following week, next week, with episode 4 of Loki, and all your feedback. And who knows, how are they going to get out of this predicament? It's going to be a mystery.
Absolutely, but only for 5 or 6 more days.
Yes,
not
exactly.
too bad. Not too bad. Thanks so much for joining us. We'll talk to you again next time.
Yes, thank you so much, fellow defenders. Remember, keep watching, keep listening, and keep defending.
For all time, always.
Yes, especially defend that figgy port.
Yes.
Bye.
Bye.